I did. They're moving kind of fast. It must be good. Well, good morning. Yesterday I decided I was going to work on my generator. It hasn't worked all year. And I've been looking at it all year going, why aren't you working? So I decided to take it apart and take a look at it, which is dangerous because I have no idea what I'm doing. So I put a battery in it. It still wouldn't click over. Wouldn't even click. So I went to my research assistant, ChatGPT. And I said, ChatGPT, I'm working on my generator. This is a picture of its model number and stuff. It's not starting. It's not clicking over. And ChatGPT comes back to me and gives me this list of things that could possibly be wrong. And I go, wow, that sounds reasonable. And the first one that was on there was there's an oil sensor that if it senses that there's no oil in it, it will shut down. And I said, oil? Well, so I checked the oil. Wow, there's hardly any oil in this thing. So I put oil in it and tried it, and it still didn't work. So I said, okay, the oil's not working. I said, what is the next thing I should look for? And ChatGPT, I said, a fuse. A fuse. And they described me what the fuse would look like and everything. So I was checking for this fuse. Could not find this fuse. I started taking wires out of its conduit and all this kind of stuff. Could not find this fuse. And I would ask again, I can't find a fuse. Well, you come back and says, well, you're an idiot. She didn't say that. But you say, well, it looks like this, and it's probably closer to this and stuff. And so I took a picture of what I was looking at, and she goes, well, you're closer. You're closer. I mean, she's really encouraging. And so I finally found, she said a red wire will be coming out of the starter button and will head down to the solenoid. And I found the red wire, but all of a sudden it turned blue. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. So I took a picture of it, and she goes, oh, that's the problem. Somebody bypassed your fuse. And I go, oh, great, now what? And she said, well, it's probably mostly the solenoid. And what you'll need is a certain tool. I can't even remember what she called it. But and I'm going, I don't even know what it meant. And she says, then you'll probably have to decide what you want to do with the solenoid. And that's where it stopped. I said, forget this. I asked her to come over and fix it for me, but she wouldn't. And then our refrigerator. Can you believe we got this brand new refrigerator because our other one broke and they wouldn't fix it, so they gave us a new one. And it's not working. I mean, the freezer on it is frosting over and stuff. And so they said, okay, we're going to send a technician. And he gets there. He's not a technician. He was a delivery guy that brought us the refrigerator. And he told us then he didn't know what it was about. And he looked at it and said, yeah, it's freezing over. It's frosting. It's not working right. You'll need to call Lowe's. And I called Lowe's and called Lowe's and called Lowe's, and they wouldn't answer. And finally, someone did call me back, and they said, oh, well, we'll give you a new one. We'll switch it out. Now, that just doesn't seem economically sound. You know, oh, it doesn't work a little bit, we're going to fix it out. So it was just all this information coming at me. And all of these, and it was just a little bit more pieces of the puzzle. And so here we are in Revelation, and we're wondering, what does all this mean? And don't ask ChatGPT, she just doesn't know. But it's all this information, and we get little bits of pieces all the way along the way. And so as we get more information, we're trying to piece it together and ask the Lord the question, what is it that you want us to know about Revelation? Now, we have been in we've talked about the 7 churches, and I know I left out Sardis that one day. It's on me, and I apologize to the people in Sardis over that. But we did cover the 7 churches, and we've now stepped into the throne room of God, and we've got the 24 elders, 12 that represent Israel, 12 that represent the Gentiles. We have seen the angels that have these different faces on them, and the mighty angel who said that no one was worthy to open up the scroll, and then we had John who was weeping for it. And we're getting more and more pieces of information. And so Jesus is going to open up the scroll, and we're going to get to see the seals, and we're ready to just jump right in, but we're not going to, all right? Because I think it would be good for us to step back and ask the question, what is our grid work for understanding revelation. Because if we go in and we don't understand maybe the big picture, then what happens is we start to apply things that maybe don't apply to it. The question is what system of eschatology do you have? So I want you to turn with me to Matthew chapter 24, verses 32 through 35. And it reads like this. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that the summer is near. So also, when you see all these things, some things that he had talked about, you know that he is near at the very gates. Truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. So that's what we're learning. We're trying to ascertain what these things are. And can we see them in our generation? Or do we have to wait for it? What is it that we're looking for? And how does it all fit in together? And we're just going to look at, there are 4 different systems of eschatology. Now, if you were asked the question, where does our church land, you're not going to find an answer, because if you go back to the Constitution, all it says is about the area of eschatology is that we believe in the bodily return of Jesus. And so all of a sudden, we're great, but how are we going to get there? What roadmap do we have? And we each might have a different one. So I'm going to present these 4, and you might go, oh, that really resonates with me. I think that one is good. Or you might go, I got some questions about that one. And at the end, I'll tell you which one that I hold to and the reasons why. So I want to give us an overview of them with this graph. Now, this graph is on a card in your pew, because I inevitably will hear someone go, can you send me that? So I'm just giving it to you right off the bat. So it compares all the different views. And what I find very interesting, not is in the differences, but what is the same? What is the same in all of these? So I'm going to list these things, and then we'll come back to this chart maybe. But the first thing that they all have in common is this: Christ reigns. He reigns. He's not waiting to reign. He's not going to reign in the future only. He reigns right now. In Matthew, he says, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. So in this age that we live in, this church age, and we'll talk a little bit about that, Christ reigns. We all have that in common. All of them will state that he is reigning now. The second thing that all of them agree to is that Christ will return in a bodily form. That Christ is going to return, that he's going to come back the same way he left, and he's going to return to us and then take us home to be with him. They all agree. They all agree on that point. Thirdly, they all believe that the church has a mission, and that is the proclamation of the gospel. And of course, we see that in Matthew 28, the Great Commission. We're sent out to make disciples. Now, we all agree on this. Now, some churches might disagree on what the nature of the gospel is, but we all believe that the church has a mission, and that is to present Christ to the nations. The fourth thing is the history. History ends in victory, because we all believe that Christ is going to return and have victory over everything. Okay, so we know that. Now I'm going to go back to the chart and add a couple of things here. I got to do this. Let's see, because I got to go back. Oh, there we go. Oh, there we go. We got it. Yeah, so here's the big chart, right? So we have the church age. So on the very top one is the definition of each of the icons. If you notice that every one of them has the church age in it. Only the first one has a rapture and a tribulation, but the second coming, you see the arrows, they're all the same. Every one of them has the same element of his coming. Satan will be loosed for a while, and that there'll be a final judgment in heaven. We all agree on that. What's different is the timing. The timing is different. We all believe that these elements are there, but when will it take place? So we're going to walk through these individually and talk a little bit about them. So this is not a thorough study of each theological grid, but it is to give you an overview of it. All right, so the first one is dispensational, got to work through that, dispensational premillennialism. That's a big talk, right? So you got to understand what that is. Dispensation. Dispensation means an era of time. And so depending on where you go to school and what you do, there are either between 4 to 7 different dispensations. In other words, God worked with Adam and Eve all the way up to the time that they sinned differently than he worked with Noah. And he worked with Noah differently than he worked with Abraham. And he worked differently with Abraham than he did Israel. And he's working differently with us as Christians than he did with Israel. He's the same, but he just communicated differently and he engaged with them differently. And so a dispensation is just an era of time in which God worked with a group of people, his people, in a specific way. Okay? So dispensationalism believes that there are so many of these dispensations, these era. The other ones don't. Now, you have covenantal theology, but they're the same as dispensations because they just call them covenants, because God works in different covenants. So premillennial. Well, the word pre means before, and so millennium means 1,000 years, and so dispensational premillennialism is that Christ will return before the 1,000-year reign, before the millennium. And that's where we will start to differ with some of the other ones. Now, after the dispensation of the church, because you have the church age, you have the rapture. That's when we get into Thessalonians, and what Thessalonians says is that in a twinkling of an eye, we will be caught up and we will hear the trumpets and we will see God face to face, right? So out of Thessalonians, we see this idea of being caught up in a twinkling of an eye. And so dispensationalists have taken it and said, that's the rapture. It's not the second coming, but we are raptured to be with Christ because of the tribulation which comes next. Because dispensationalists don't believe that Christians will go through the tribulation. So they're taken up and taken out. You have the tribulation period, and then you have the second coming of Christ, in which he will then reign over 1,000 years, a literal 1,000 years. After which, Satan is loosed, the final judgment, and then this creation is destroyed, and a whole new creation will be made. That's dispensationalism. Now, this has been made popular by the books and movies Left Behind. How many people have seen the book, read the book, or seen the movie? So you've seen dispensationalism in its fullest, and probably its most extreme in those books. So that made that popular. So the next one, so we're going to move on, then we're going to kind of try to put them all back together again. The next one is, what do we got here? Amillennialism. Means no, none. So amillennialists believe that there is no actual 1,000-year period of time. They believe that the reign of Christ, that the church age is that period of time called the millennium. And so all the things that we would think would happen in dispensationalism prior to the millennium, like the tribulation, they believe that it's happening now. There is the growth of the church and the tribulation of the church, and it's all happening in this expanse. We don't know how long that time is, and we don't know we know when it started, but we don't know when it will end. During this time of the church age, Christ is reigning spiritually over us. And Satan has been bound, but he's been bound in a very specific way. Where premillennialists would say that he is cast down in chains, amillennialists would say no, the only way that he is bound is that he cannot stop the progress of the gospel. That's the only way that he's bound. Otherwise, he's free to tempt, he's free to involve himself into politics, into people's lives, and he's free to do that. But he cannot stop the progress of the gospel. That's amillennialism. Satan then will be loosed, and he will create havoc, and then Christ will come literally, and he will take care of that. Final judgment, then everything's burned up, and we get a new creation, a new heaven. That is amillennialism. Things will not get better, but things will just carry on, and Christians are not taken out of the tribulation. They go through it. Now, post-millennialism. Post, meaning after, millennium. So they believe that the coming of Christ will be after the millennium. The question is what do they think is the millennium? Well, they're like amillennial in that sense, is they don't think that it is a specific 1,000-year reign. They say it is just a long period of time. Now, and Christ reigns. Now, what they will hold that's different than the amillennialist is that they believe that society will get better and better and better and better and better until it reaches a golden age. And when it reaches that golden age, Christ will return. They do believe that Satan will be bound at that time and that Christ will return. And there'll be final judgment and the recreation. Now, that's different than postmillennialists, because postmillennialists don't think things are going to get better and better and better. They see the tribulation and tribulation and tribulation. That's postmillennialism. Now, postmillennialism is, I know, is popular oftentimes with Christians who are really involved in politics. Because oftentimes when people are really involved in politics, they believe that the church should have this great influence in government, and if they did, then things will get better and better and better and better and better, and we'll see a golden age. So they will bring the gospel in and think that everybody should be obedient to it. There's a lot that goes into that I know, but that's often popular with postmillennialists because they see in changing government, they need the gospel infused in it, and everything will lead to a golden age. It's also often believed by people when the economy is doing really well. When everything's doing well, everybody's like, well, good, it's going to get better and better and better. And then you have the stock market crash, and then everybody goes back to postmillennialism or dispensational. Right? So then we have the last one, which is not, some of you may know about it, but most people haven't, and it's called preterism. It's preterists. Now, there are two kinds of preterists. There is the full preterist, and then there is a partial preterist. A full preterist believes that everything in Revelation occurred prior to AD 70. So the revelation of Revelation is to the church who's going through persecution in the first century, and that everything is culminated and ended at the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. Okay? And that Christ came back at that time, spiritually, because a full preterist doesn't believe that he's coming back in person. He came back spiritually and then ushered us into the church age, which they would call, they wouldn't even call it the millennium. They call it this time of the church age. At the end, Satan's loosed. Jesus does come back. That is partial preterism. Partial preterism believes that all of Revelation applies to the first century and is culminated in AD 70, except for the coming of Jesus Christ. They will say that at the end of this long age, that Jesus will come back physically. And so this chart here represents the partial preterist view. And the reason why you have a partial preterist view is because full preterism got so much conflict because the Bible talks about Jesus coming back the way he left. And so you get people who are partial preterists. So that is our overview of them. Now the question is, what does this all mean? What does all this mean to us at this time? And not even about the system that you might think. Well, the first thing that we want to realize is that we want to keep Christ the center. Christ needs to be at the center of this whole thing. I mean, remember, this is a revelation of Jesus, not of the end times, though we're seeing some of that information, but really it's to point us all to Jesus. And so we want to keep him center because we might disagree on these things. The second one is that we need to stay faithful in every season. In every season. I'm going to talk about that in a second. We need to be faithful in every season. We need to hold hope firmly, but humbly. In other words, you might have a strong opinion about the end times eschatology, and somebody else might have a strong opinion in another area of eschatology, and we need to hold to our eschatology firmly. I'm not saying we don't just give it up, but we need to do it humbly because we don't know all the information. We don't have all the information. We have some of it. And when you think you're looking for a fuse and it's not there, you can build a whole, I could do a lot of work on my generator and it'll all be wrong. So we just need to hold it humbly. Fourthly, we need to rejoice because in the end, it's victory. And all of them believe in that, is victory. Now, the thing about preterism is that, and this is how we all do it in our system. Preterism we all take something literal and then we all spiritualize other things. So preterism takes the time statements that Jesus makes literal. And so when Jesus says, in this generation, this generation will not pass until it sees all these things. They take that literal. Now, a premillennialist will say, well, we believe that the 1,000 years is literal, and so we build a theology around that, and so we have to explain generation. What does he mean by generation? Okay? So we all take something literal, and then we spiritualize that which we can't really understand or explain. So we all do it. So the question is then, what do we do? How have I reconciled all these things? Because it's important to know my system, because when we get into the details, it will inform me how I interpret these things. All right? So, from just all that I said, who thinks I'm a preterist? Oh, you're right, I'm not a preterist. They're almost heretical. But I've had a couple good friends who were preterists. Am I postmillennial? How many people think I'm dispensational? Okay, you're the brave ones, you're right, I am. But I'm not, but I am a pre-wrath premillennial dispensationalist. Okay? Write this down, okay? Pre-wrath premillennial dispensationalist. What that means is that the tribulation, I don't think that God ever says that he will take us away from tribulation. I think the church goes through tribulation. But what he does remove us from is his wrath. And so in the dispensational system, you will have the great wrath of God that comes out on earth. And I think, whenever that is, because we don't know exactly when that would be, that's when we're raptured out. Because you think about it realistically, the first three and a half years of the tribulation is peaceful. It's peaceful. So why would God rapture us out of a time that's peaceful? Instead, because we will go through those kinds of tribulation. So how does that all fit together? What do you do with the words like, in this generation? Now, this is what I think this generation is. One, Satan is not omniscient. He doesn't know everything. He doesn't know the future. He doesn't know when Christ is coming back. So I started thinking about that and asking myself the question, if he doesn't know all that, then how has he set up this, the environment, the economy, and everything to bring about the tribulation period? Because that's going to take time. So what I think is that because Satan doesn't know when the end is coming, and whatever generation that we're talking to, he has formulated the possibility for all this to happen in case Christ returns. And so how that plays out is that in the early church, they saw Caesar as being the Antichrist. And so all of Revelation that talked about the Antichrist was supposed to be Caesar. Well, Jesus didn't come back. So who then becomes? Well, later on then, everybody thought it was the Pope. The Pope, the papacy was corrupt. It didn't seem like it was staying true to the Word of God, and everybody starts to think, well, they are probably the Antichrist. And every time they had a new Pope, he must be the Antichrist. In that generation, they would think, and it was possible, maybe it would have been if Jesus had come back. Then Hitler comes around, and everybody's going, well, Hitler must be the Antichrist. It seemed right? It looked like he was going to take over the world. I think that Satan set that up so that in the event that Christ came back, the Antichrist would be here. Well, he didn't come back. Well, some people thought that during the Gulf War that Saddam Hussein had the potential of being the Antichrist because it really, I think that it's going to take a Muslim to make peace with Israel. It doesn't because they're the only ones who can keep the rest of the Muslims from wanting to attack them. And so I think it'll be a Muslim. So people thought, I had a professor at Dallas who wrote a book on it, that Saddam Hussein, it was possibly the Antichrist. But guess what? He wasn't. But he could have been if Christ had returned. And so I think that every generation, JFK, I don't know if you remember that. People thought that he was the prophet, the one who was shot in the head but came back to life, because there was all these rumors that he was on an island somewhere and he was just going to show up and be himself. Everybody was saying that this must be the end times. And so even in our current generation, people will look around and say, well, and depending on where you fall on this, Trump might be the Antichrist, or it might be a Democrat, or it might be Putin. Who knows? Because we don't know when Christ is coming back. But so when Jesus says, in this generation, look at these things, I think it applies to every generation before the coming of Christ. I can say confidently, in this generation, when you see these things, his coming is near. What does near mean? Well, tomorrow will be nearer than it is today, right? So we don't know what near means, but we do know it's closer than it is today. It's closer in this generation. So I believe in post-wrath premillennial dispensationalism. And we're going to get into the Revelation, and you'll see that come out in what I teach. Because I do believe that God is not finished with Israel. I think there's a place in history with Israel. I don't know what that means. Is it national Israel? Because in 1948, Israel became a nation, and everybody was going, this is the end times, because it's been they've become a nation. But they're as pagan can be. The system, their government system, they're not a theocracy. So it really can't be them. Is it true Israel? When Jesus said to one of the churches that the synagogue of Satan, those Jews, but they're not really Jews. And so we have, what is true Israel? True Israel, all the Jews that have accepted Christ as their Savior. And we have been grafted into that. And so all the promises made to Israel, how is that fulfilled? Is it fulfilled to the nation of Israel, or to Israel that we've been grafted into, and it's the nation of God? We're going to be talking about that. And whatever system that you fall under will inform you on how you do that. Now, I think that dispensationalism is by the preponderance of evidence. Okay, that's a law thing, isn't it? The preponderance of evidence points to dispensationalism than to any other group. But I know good and faithful believers who believe other things, so I choose to hold my position humbly and loosely, so that we live in the tension of biblical disagreement. Okay, because I think we're called to live in that tension and fellowship together. So whatever your view, be patient with me or send me an email. I will give you, what's his name back there? Yost. It's kind of like Jason. Yes, I had to run down. It's like calling out your children, you know. I was thinking that, anyway. That didn't work. So next week, we're going to be able to jump into chapter 8. But no, we're not really. Okay, because we're getting into the Thanksgiving holiday season, and so I'm going to take a break from Revelation, let some of the classes that are teaching Revelation catch up, because they've been doing it for 2 years or so, and still are only first verse in chapter 1. But But we're going to take a break, because we're going to talk about issues of gratitude. We're going to talk about, we'll be in the Advent season, and then on January, we're going to jump back into Revelation. I'll give a little overview, and we'll get right into the seals of it. But that's where we are. You know, and one of the great things is that Christ has given us this information, right? He's given us all these pieces so that we can try to find out and figure out something and his coming. It's to give us hope in the reality of that he is always with us, because he's reigning right now. He reigns here with us right now. And so that's a great hope. Even if we're going through difficulty or some kind of tribulation ourselves, he is with us, and he is in control of all things. And so however it plays out, we know that. And that is a great pleasure. So how are we grateful? And that's what we're going to be talking about. We become grateful. And in that gratefulness is also giving. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about that as we go along, and some other things. And for right now, we have this great opportunity. We're going to take up our offering. It's an opportunity for you to worship, because really giving is worship. It's less about paying the bills, that's important, but it is about worship and what we give to God because he has given so much to us.